Welcome to Sponsored Post Podcast, behind the lens of how influential content is made. I am Justin Moore. I'm the founder and CEO of Trending Family, which is an influencer marketing agency that launches campaigns with family-friendly influencers. Today, I am so excited to be joined by David Herrmann, who is the president of Herrmann Digital, which is a paid social advertising company specializing in scaling direct-to-consumer brands online. Welcome, David.
Hey, good to be here.
Great to have you. So why don't you share your background and story and how you got into paid media?
Yeah, for sure. It kind of started back when I was working in the music industry, working for small indie record labels back in the early 2000s, managing MySpace pages. Was pretty much just fell in love with the idea of digital, back when I was in college doing marketing where I was learning print. Realized how quickly and easy it was to get a message across online versus doing a insertion order and, having it in the magazine and things like that. And kind of through being that space, getting laid off a couple of times during the recession, I ended up working for a brand. And as part of the post-recession world, I was basically given the task of running marketing for an international company by myself at the young age of 23 years old. And having no clue what to do, I started to invest in building online. And at that point, Facebook business pages had just launched, and I built a pretty big following for the brand on that. And then pretty much right when Facebook ads started, we had already had, 15,000 people on our Facebook pages. So I started to kind of, test with it, realizing real quick what a power this is. And that sort of started the love-hate relationship that is with paid social advertising. And, I've been doing it ever since. And kind of moved around, worked in the entertainment world, worked in lead gen, worked in just brand awareness. It was kind of everything, and finally ended up in the direct to consumer world doing direct response e-commerce.
Super interesting. So, obviously the paid social landscape has changed pretty dramatically, since those first early days. I remember on Facebook, especially, like most brands were running just giant campaigns to get people to like their pages, right? Yeah. Like that was the end all be all, right? And so like in your mind, what has been some of the biggest changes over the last, number of years in terms of brands' paid social strategy?
I think that as what we're seeing, especially with the bigger brands, the idea of actually having a ROI attached to a dollar and actually seeing it in real time is something that has, for lack of a better term, like surprised a lot of these bigger companies because, so many of like the Nikes and the Adidas of the world, they throw up a commercial, right? And they just put $1 million behind it. And they just look at this consumer trend. Okay, yeah, the consumer trend says we got more sales. Therefore, we're going to say, oh, it's probably because of the commercial. But they really don't know. And so what we've seen is a lot of the brands, a lot of the bigger brands, and a lot of these like D2C brands that have come up, it's tracking better, it's scaling, it's understanding what their cost to acquire a customer are to their LTV, lifetime total value, and really building up a portfolio online. And the smart advertisers and the smart businesses are actually taking these numbers, making dashboards out of them and saying like, okay, we know it costs this much to get a customer, right? Like, we'll be honest, the days of Facebook 2013 to 2016 are not there anymore, where there was no competition. Now there's a ton of competition, and it's gotten to this point where we're looking at things from a different perspective and scaling a different way because of the big brands coming into the mix, And so that's been a really big change, is seeing that, because before it was like, you're not competing with Nike. You're not competing with Starbucks because they're just putting up brand awareness. Now they're putting up conversion campaigns and getting into what all of us else are, competing in. It's like, okay, now we're playing with the big dogs.
Right. And there's been criticisms of direct-to-consumer brands today in that a lot of these DTC brands who are raising a ton of VC dollars, that money is just basically going directly to buy ads on Facebook and Instagram, right? And you see this proliferation of not only the brand dollars, but the brands themselves, right? And so many DTC brands exploding, and even, incumbent brands trying to launch their own kind of, DTC brands in-house. Talk a little bit about the profile of a brand who should be using paid social, the types of products that do best. Obviously it's changed over the years, but how do you think about the best brands and the best products that do well on using paid social?
So really what it boils down to is two things. One is making sure that you understand who your customer is and making sure that they are actively wanting to spend money on a platform, right? I mean, I get a lot of people that hit us up and they don't understand what their lifetime total value of a customer is. They don't understand what their average order value is. They don't really have a good site. And, before I tell anybody I'm not going to take somebody's money because that's just a death wish, it's really building a portfolio online of saying like, okay, I know who my customer is. I generally know how much it's going to cost to get that customer in the door. And I'm able to essentially lose money on that first touch point because I know that my lifetime total value of that customer, looking at data historically, has been, X amount higher. And so that's a profitable understanding of a brand or business that can scale on paid social. And that's really the key of this whole thing. You can do the lead gen, you can do all these things, and lead gen works tremendous on Facebook, B2B even. We work with a lot of B2B brands that they'll scale either on LinkedIn or Facebook, and they'll scale their lead gen there for, months on end. But the key is it profitable? Because it's really easy for someone to fill out a survey on Facebook, but are they really interested? And then it's understanding, in the data, like, is a lead cost of $7 better to get more costs at them, or is it better to get a lead cost at $40 for less of those, but those people are actually converting? It's hard to say that there's like a pinpoint of like, hey, this is the perfect brand for paid social, because the reality is everybody's perfect if you understand the fundamentals of how it works. And if you are ready to spend money there, knowing that you're probably going to lose money right away. Understanding too, what your avatar is, who is your customer, and what do they do online to build around them.
You tweeted today that if your average order value is under $50 and you're planning to scale on Facebook, you will have a difficult time being profitable. What did you mean by that?
So I've tweeted a few times about this, and this is the explanation, is that if you're selling for, $30 to $35 to $40, you'll find sales. I mean, you'll make money on the platform. The reality is you can't scale that because, again, the law of diminishing returns says the more you scale, the more you're prospecting, meaning the costs are going to continue to go up because Facebook's going to have a harder time finding your customer the more you scale, because that's just how it works. And so the idea of having an AOV of $50 or higher allows you to essentially incrementally increase your cost per acquisition as you scale higher and higher and higher. And you'll see this more when you're in the six-figure range on spending on these platforms. And you'll notice it when you go from 100,000 to 200,000 to 300,000. And what's been interesting is Facebook specifically has actually on their site now, on their advertising portal, they actually have a section on law of diminishing returns that they've actually come out and said, hey, you can't throw $1 million and expect to make $3 million back. That's not reality, And so that's sort of why I say $50 is a good range, because at least you can find enough customers who are willing to spend, if your AOV is 50, that you're going to come in at that range. If you're trying to get a CPA and you're trying to do a 2X, right, that's $25. And the reality is you're not going to find a lot of people in that because the competition's too high. You're playing in an auction. So that's sort of the mindset behind a $50 plus AOV, but then always having the mindset in with those AOVs is, how do I consistently increase this month after month after month? What do I need to do once the customer is on my site to get them to take the leap of spending, $60 to $70? What do I have to do to make that happen? Because then you're able to basically spend all day on these platforms and scale as far as you want.
Right. So if you wouldn't mind, I'd love you to put your strategy hat on. Not that you ever took it off, but put your strategy hat on. And, we have a lot of brand marketers who listen to the podcast, and I'd love to just do kind of a rapid fire analysis of, the main social platforms, and give me your little POV, your point of view on each of these in terms of paid social strategy in general. So let's start with YouTube.
So YouTube is really, really good as a long tail paid social strategy. So specifically when you're looking at holidays, for example, getting your ads at least started in September and October to get them optimized is really essential. YouTube works really well, believe it or not, when you have a strategy in mind and you're also utilizing Google's other products. Imagine that. But the key with YouTube is you need to have high quality video. If your video is not high quality and you don't know who your avatar is, you're going to waste a lot of money there and it's going to not be pretty.
When you say high quality, do you mean like very glossy, or like what do you mean by that?
No, I mean just at least it's not shot on an old iPhone and it's 15 seconds long with not really good audio and good lighting. You need to invest some time into a good video or get a good editor, because one of the two needs to happen. Because ultimately the YouTube rewards you if you're going to get more people to view. So the more people that view your videos, the more earned conversions you get, because you're basically not having to pay for that, because it's increasing the algorithm, so to speak. And that's the golden ticket for the platform. And the quicker you can get views and people watching your video all the way through and clicking, the quicker Google can figure out who it is that's buying your product. And obviously that's what we all want. So that's what I mean by that, and getting in front of the right people with that message. And then the other thing with YouTube is, you have so many niches on YouTube. Understand who is the top influencers in your space and trying to get your video in front of their pages and putting it there and building content around the people that are engaging with that YouTube influencer's content. Come up with a solution. Hey, they shoot video like this, therefore I'm going to shoot video like this.
Right. Interesting. Okay. How about Instagram?
So Instagram, similar to Facebook, since it's part of the same family, it's all about direct response, creating high quality creative in the way of stuff that feels native to the platform. So the best way to say for Instagram is building ads around one of two things. One is, especially if you're in Instagram stories, is creating user-generated content that looks like user-generated content, meaning they're shooting it directly from an iPhone or an Android, whatever you want. It's a first-person narrative about a product, but you need to be very clear in the first 5 seconds or less what it is you're trying to sell, and have some text overlay on the creative in order to get in front of those people. And the reason is, you got to think about it from the standpoint of when a user is scrolling through Instagram stories, the last thing they want is to be seeing this high quality ad. It feels like an ad. It acts like an ad. So they're going to treat it like an ad, right? And they're going to scroll right past it because you're interrupting them. So the goal is to stop that, right? The goal is to interrupt them, to say, oh, what is this? And they think it's a friend or whatever. And that's why Instagram stories UGC works. In the feed, we find that really high quality imagery still is the kicker there, where the product is featured in 75% plus of the image. Anything less than that, it doesn't tend to work. Because again, Instagram is all about the photos. They're not reading the caption. It's very much a high quality game.
This best practice of 75% of the product in the photo, are these things that you learn just through trial and error, or are these things that you're reading on like the best practices guides for some of these platforms? Because I mean, that's one of the, I think, major frustrations from a lot of brands, is that it just feels so overwhelming to like master it,
Right. It's a process of doing it for so many years and always just looking at the data and studying it. Because when we take on brands, the first thing we do is we look at their creatives, because it is so crucial to the aspect of the platform and the performance of the advertisements, right? And that's where I'm completely judged, is on the creative aspect. And so what we find is you'll get a lot of people that will create this life, like for example, just we'll utilize a jewelry brand, since we were talking about this today, is, if you create a piece of content where it shows a model, right? And the image is mostly of the model wearing the jewelry, and you see that image, you're going to just instantly go past it because you don't know what the advertisement is telling you, because you're not going to read the caption. So what you find is, instead of doing that, just put the necklace or whatever up close in front of the shot to say, hey, this is what we have, buy it. You have to dumb yourself down in a way where it's like, okay, for somebody that's literally has 2 seconds of our attention, how do we convey it? Because we know they're not going to read. And that's why you want your product to be in 75% of the creative.
So, I mean, you're, I would say, definitely known as a very prominent person who highlights the hiccups in the Facebook advertising ecosystem, right? And you have a Facebook group, in fact, like a closed group where you have thousands of marketers talking about best practices and things you guys are all experiencing. How did that come about? And obviously, Facebook is kind of the behemoth in the room in terms of where a lot of people are spending their dollars. But how do you think about Facebook these days?
So the Facebook group, my colleague Andrew Foxwell and I, we started it in response to what happened in March, which was there was a significant outage on Facebook in March. And anyone that runs ads remembers it. It was to the point where not only Facebook backend was down, but Instagram was down as well as the front end, which never happens, right? It's always one or the other. It was a pretty big issue, and it was down for, I think, a little over 24 hours. And we received no messages from Facebook about this. And Andrew and I, we got on the phone because, we manage just a ton of money in these platforms, and every client called us freaking out. And we just said, we have to be a voice. Like, we were getting tweets left and right from people, and we just said, we have to figure out a way as a collective group to get in front of Facebook. And so that's why we started the Facebook group. And what we ended up happening was that Facebook group, we started to get CMOs of Fortune 100 companies joining us. We got agency owners joining us. And after about 3 months, we were getting some of the biggest names in the industry in this group. A lot of these Facebook groups, it's people flexing their expertise. What we found was with this group, it was people coming together as a collective and saying, like, look, we all are in the same boat. Let's try to figure this out together. And we got noise and got Facebook to start communicating us when we got, I think it was Business Insider and Wall Street Journal. We got a mention in there. And that kind of helped really start it to get Facebook's attention. And we have some friends at Facebook who've really been instrumental. And frankly, I would say the last 6 months with Facebook, they've been tremendous. I've been so impressed with how quickly they've been able to kind of right the ship in a way, recognizing that there's issues, which honestly, before 6 months ago, Facebook say there's issues. No, it's not happening. They recognize that there's errors. They recognize that there is damage. They recognize that people need refunds. And I don't really know what is going to happen, but they've been doing it. You see it on the ads manager. They're telling us about, hey, you get this refund, and this new Facebook status monitor that came out that we got to use, sadly, on Thanksgiving. But, that's just a sign that they're listening. I don't ever want to take credit for anything, and I'm not going to take credit, but it's like they're listening to us, all of us. And that is such a testament. And I'm honestly just always impressed with the feedback loop that we have with our partner reps. So yeah, it's been a lot better. And my hesitancy with complaining on Twitter about Facebook has gone down slightly. There's still hiccups, but as a whole, it's definitely improved.
I can't remember where I read this quote, but it was something along the lines of the best brands and the best products succeed in spite of themselves. I kind of see that a little bit Facebook makes all of their money from ads. And so the fact that they don't have a functional ads platform or one that has, a non-trivial amount of issues in 2019 still seems pretty amazing. But putting that all aside, putting your brand strategy hat back on, like, how do you think about Facebook now in terms of how brands should approach the platform?
I think that they need to approach it as the same as they always have, but be very careful to not put all their eggs in one basket. It's very crucial to think about what your strategy is online. And yes, Facebook can still be your number one, but being able to diversify and say, you know what, are we doing things on other platforms? Are we on Pinterest, on Snapchat? Are we on Google? And going like, what are we doing outside of the Facebook ecosystem that will at least not kill us if, God forbid, Facebook closes shop one day, your business isn't going with it. It's really important for brands to be thinking critically about retention of their customers and going like, all right, how do we avoid having to pay Facebook to show the same marketing message that we could get for free by emailing them, small cost for email, but like, what else can we do outside of Facebook to get things rocking and rolling? And a lot of brands don't think about the content marketing. A lot of brands don't think about affiliates, influencers. And it's just like everybody got spoiled for so many years by putting $1 up on Facebook and getting $3 back. And the reality is that's just not happening anymore. And there is going to be a doomsday because at some point, that $50 AOV that I mentioned earlier is going to go to $75 because it's just too competitive. And a lot of people aren't thinking what's happening next year, which is a presidential election, which means more money on the platform that they have to compete with. And so it's getting outside of saying the paid media is not in my control. As much as I want to think it is not. It is a third party platform that determines what happens. And so how can I get away from that I still own my customer?
You've been pretty vocal about, other platforms like Snapchat and Pinterest on Twitter. I don't want to like group them all together as like secondary platforms, but like Snapchat, for example, like the return on ad spend that you've talked about has been pretty phenomenal compared to some of these other platforms. So how are you thinking about like Snapchat, Pinterest, that kind of thing?
Yeah. So, am I going to put an entire budget behind those platforms? No. The thing about Snapchat, for example, is it's a really good secondary platform. So if I could take 20% of my budget from Facebook for 2020 and at least go, you know what? We're willing to diversify some and try it. Now, are you going to find success within the first week of trying it? No. It's just like you did when you started Facebook. It takes time. And so many marketers, they're so used to Facebook just working so that when they go to another platform and it's crickets after the first week, they just go, nope, it's not going to work. We're moving on. We're going back to Facebook. And that's what you hear time and time again. And I can tell you my most successful brands on Snapchat, we lost money for the first month and a half. Like we were bleeding money, but we believed that our audience was there because we saw the data that they were there. We just kept improvising on creative and building and building and building. And now, when Facebook crashed on Thanksgiving morning, we scaled up our ads on Snapchat and we had record profit days because at least we were somewhere. And frankly, the CPMs on Snapchat, for example, are $1.50 or $2. So yeah, I'm going to double down where I can. And platforms like Pinterest are the same. Pinterest gets pigeonholed into being what they call a social network. And the reality is it's not a social network. And it hasn't been a social network. It's an image search tool. It's Google image search, essentially. And the more you treat it as what it is, the better it is. And so when we launch ads on Pinterest, we go, okay, we know that this is a very top of funnel awareness play. That's what this is. Let's get eyeballs, knowing that customers that go on Pinterest are a lot higher in terms of buying product than any of the other platforms. There's so many stats that back this up. So we know they might not buy on Pinterest, but if I can get eyeballs on them to click an ad and then eventually get them to convert on Instagram and Facebook, I'm going to do that all day because it's just a different customer. And so that's really how you have to approach these other platforms is you can't say, I need a 3X by 30 days in, because that's not going to happen. It's figuring it out for your customer avatar and building the creative that makes sense for them.
How do you think about Twitter these days? Obviously, I think it's really had a resurgence. And let's just talk about the Peloton ad and then the Aviation Gin ad that followed right after that. I mean, these like massive cultural moments I think are super interesting because, I mean, you look at the impact that some of this content can have. I think, the Peloton Gin ad had like 10 million views on Twitter and 2 or 3 million on Instagram, for example. So I think a lot of people look to Instagram as kind of a tastemaker, but a lot of things are happening on Twitter. And I think a lot of brands sideline it as part of their paid social mix. So how do you think about Twitter?
Yeah, so I love Twitter. I mean, Twitter is my favorite platform there is. I would not run ads on Twitter. If anything, you would run remarketing and at least attempt to try to get people's eyeballs that have already seen your products. That's going to be probably about it. Frankly, just the ads platform isn't what it's cracked up to be. The data and everything that Twitter has, I mean, we kind of all know Twitter has historically, from a product standpoint, has kind of been behind the 8 ball, so to speak. And that's Jack Dorsey's directive. The ads platform has never been what the bread and butter of Twitter is, but they need it to survive. So it's an awareness play again. I don't run any ads on the platform. A good friend of mine that runs an agency, he swears by Twitter, and God bless his soul. Like, he makes it work. And he's the only one I know that actually has been really good with Twitter ads. But, he's a really smart guy and he's really good with data. And it takes that kind of a person to play on Twitter because of just how the platform is. So I use Twitter just as a comms tool because it's the best one out there.
So talking about some of these next platforms, I don't know if I would call TikTok a next platform, but like, these platforms, these social platforms, they come and go. It's hard to really know where to invest in. I mean, how do you counsel your clients in terms of, when they email you and they say, we need a TikTok strategy or something, like how do you approach that in terms of, not throwing money into somewhere that's unproven, but also not wanting to miss out or miss the boat?
For sure. So TikTok is an interesting case study because of just how quickly it came, right? It was Musically got bought by ByteDance. ByteDance turned it into TikTok and then invested $1 billion in acquisition cost. And lo and behold, there we are. TikTok is still very young. What you get in terms of the data from the platform is very, 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 frankly, not helpful. It's sort of like, hey, your ad went here and it drove clicks. Okay, did it get conversion? We don't know. And so in that regard, it's young. Now, I would say the best marketers out there are looking to see how they can improvise and utilize the platform in the way that it's meant to be done. And Chipotle is a good example. Chipotle is doing tremendous things on TikTok with their apps. It seems to be a lot of apps are using it for app installs because that's actually trackable. I ran some ads from Black Friday to Cyber Monday with some influencers on the platform. And, it was fine. We got traffic from it. I had a hard time finding if they actually attributed to sales, but the TikTok thing is always keep in the back of your mind because they spent $1 billion on acquisition. To make that money back, right? It's a business. And so I think that they are a player. And I think they're right behind Snapchat in terms of where they're at in regards to playing in the Facebook, Instagram, Google world. But I would probably, as of right now, put them on the same level as Pinterest in terms of like, this is an awareness play, and that's what you're getting from it.
I wanted to circle back on something you said earlier about the importance of the creative in terms of how well this ad is going to perform. And I'm just curious, when a client comes to you and you're tasked with, okay, here's the creative and here's the copy, here's the ad strategy, like how much is fully baked? How much is your team tasked with creating all of that? Because I have to imagine, like you mentioned, like the creative is such a crucial part of it. So like, how do you handle all that?
The creative aspect of our business is easily the most difficult place to play. I don't know a single media buyer that's not constantly trying to think about how to better articulate what we need. At the end of the day, this is a creative game. And whoever can produce the best creative gets the most sales. It's really what it is. It's not product, it's creative. I hate to say it, but it's true. Like we've seen this time and time again. What I always tell clients is twofold. I always say, you need to decide one of two things. Do you want to be awareness and do you want to create a brand or do you want to get sales? Because a lot of times they don't fall in line with one another. And it's important for you to always be thinking about your brand and your direct response ads because they're two separate things. The best advertisers can mix those together in a way that makes it look good, but still is providing results, which is driving a top of funnel, like high quality creative. And that's strictly awareness. And you know that it's strictly awareness. And then you're following up with UGC videos of them talking about the products. All the D2C brands today are doing a really good job of this. Drink House and like all these brands, they're really good at content. But it comes down to being able to articulate what you need. And I keep a library of creative on my computer that I send to clients. And I say, hey, refer to video 3 in this doc as part of our creative brief for what we're looking for, because you want to give them an example. And I've thought long and hard about, I outsource a lot of creative to people that I trust that do this for a living. And, we have some clients that are spending so much money in the platform that will cycle through creative pretty much every 3 to 5 days. And it's a lot of work. But we're saying like, hey, that piece of creative, the data is saying that the average drop off is happening at the 6-second mark. So let's try to figure out how to change that 6-second mark. And let's add something else right there as a transition. Maybe that's where we put a marketing message, or what can we do there? It's all about improvising the data That way you're making real-time results happen through what you're seeing on the platform in real time.
Do you find that there's certain types of content that are performing better on certain platforms like video or photo or UGC or things like that?
Yeah, I mean, Facebook's very, very, very open about video being the number one, right? They're very, very adamant. We see video work really well if a product, like if it's a piece of commoditized brand, like if it's a watch or a sunglass or an earring or something like that, you can pretty much get away with static images. If it's like a product that really needs an explanation, video is the way to go. And that's what I usually tell clients is like, start with at least iPhone videos of your product and then work your way up to better. And most of us have newer iPhones that are the newest iPhone where the camera's phenomenal. I mean, they're running commercials with it. And go on Amazon and buy a light kit for $20 and make a little studio in your house for your products and just start shooting stuff yourself and testing it. Because the reality is you're going to find something that works pretty quickly because you're going to see the data come in and be able to respond in real time.
Right. So obviously here at Trending Family, like we're an influencer agency. So this is kind of what we do all day long. And you've mentioned that you do work with influencers. You did some stuff for Black Friday. Kind of wanted to chat with you a little bit about using influencer content for paid social, because we've seen just a huge proliferation of that in terms of, number one, an influencer's organic post is not going as far as it once did a few years back, obviously. And so, these brands and agencies that are tasked with activating these influencer programs, whitelisting now seems, part and parcel of these partnerships, right? And so do you see that as an effective model, or are you thinking more about partnering with influencers to create good, compelling content that you can use as paid assets?
So we do a lot with influencers. Mainly the focus has been on using branded content on Facebook. Essentially what that is Facebook and Instagram, they have a tool that you can literally turn on, which is this thing called branded content. What that is you literally check a box when you're uploading your video. So if an influencer is posting on Facebook, they click that box and then they approve a brand to have access to run ads on that post. It just came out for Instagram now to do that on Instagram stories. That really has been a game changer because the old way of doing things was just such a mess of like, hey, we need to get access to your page. And, then they don't know what to do. And, it's like the manager's trying to figure it out. And it's just this mess. So now that we're able to utilize branded content and turn that on, we're running a lot of ads for products, especially around holidays, where we are targeting their audience with a branded content ad for our product. And then we're remarketing with branded ads from us. So the first thing they hear is from their influencer, their friend, or whoever it may be, someone that they follow, right? They hear from them before they hear from us. Because typically that's how we interact with things, right? We hear it from a friend, someone that we, down the street, it's like, hey, I got this product, I love it. Oh, now there's comes retargeting ads. It really is, when you need to cut through the noise, that's the way to do it. And it's worked really well. And, we've got some influencers that we've worked with, mainly more on the celebrity side, like they're TV stars who actually are cheaper than going after influencers for some weird reason. Like for one of our clients, we have a famous actress on television. She's got a show on CBS. And we just asked her, we said, hey, would you ever do a post? And this was like a year ago. And she loved the product. And she just took a photo of wearing the product and sent it back to us and said, use this for whatever you want. That one photo has generated over $1 million in sales. And it's a small brand. This is a small business. We can try every other piece of creative and it doesn't work. And you know how much we paid for that? We paid like $3 to ship them the product. And that was it. So influencers work. I just think that we as a collective have said, you know what? The idea in the days of utilizing, 5 million plus followers on Instagram for scale is kind of over, because you don't want to go that way. You want to go for like really quality people who are following these people, not because they find them attractive or like they're following them because they're funny. Like really, that's the people who are going to get most squeezed, is if you're following those people for a specific reason that's not, monetizable in a way.
It sounds like you're a fan of working with influencers from a quantitative standpoint, right? Because like you've seen that there's proven methods where you can actually drive sales with these assets that the influencers are created, whether it's dark posts or on IG or Facebook or something, or, these branded content ads you're running or whatever like that. And yet it still seems like most brands are primarily interested in influencer marketing for more of a brand awareness play, right? Like they're not, I talk to so many clients, and prospective clients who are not repurposing the assets whatsoever. And so do you think that that transition is going to happen eventually, that brands wake up to like, you need to get more mileage out of these assets that you're paying these influencers to produce? How do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of lack of education in this space, to be honest. I mean, Facebook's not sending press releases out about branded content. A lot of brands seem to just throw money out the window at these people and expect them to get all their sales. And when they don't, they just go, okay, well, we're done with that. Moving on. We have a client that we work with in the activewear space. And we decided for Black Friday, Cyber Monday, we were only going to show micro influencers talking about the products. And all we did was we ran ads from influencers that had 3,000 to 8,000 people following them as the ads, and them just talking about the products. And those posts generated almost a 2x return for a brand that historically barely breaks a 1. Because the idea is that we can't beat activewear brands. We can't beat Nike, FabFitFun, these huge brands on brand. We can't beat them, but we can beat them on messaging and how we deliver that message. And that's how you do it, is through branded content and influencers. And I hate using the term influencer, because reality is you're just looking for advocates. That's what you're looking for. You're looking for someone who literally has tried your product, they like your product, and they want to talk about it. And the more realistic you can get with that, the better it's going to be. We have a jewelry client we work with. We had basically this mom open one of our jewelry packages, and it was a girl crying, this like 6-year-old, right? She's opening this package crying, opening the product. We ran that as an ad because she said, use it. That ad, we've been running that pretty much consistently since July, and it produces every single time. It's shot on an iPhone 5. The quality is terrible, but we actually edited it. We got a good editor, and we put at the end what product it was. And we just said, making dreams happen for everybody. Like just some sentimental jargon, but it was authentic and it worked, and that's really why we preach this UGC content, utilizing these brand advocates.
Yeah, it's interesting. I had a conversation with a client recently in the telecommunications space, and they had a really interesting experience. So we ran an influencer campaign for them, both with micro influencers and then a separate campaign with more like mid-tier creators. And as part of the deliverables for the campaign, the influencers created these cut down assets, right? 30-second, 1-minute spot kind of thing that they posted on their social. But then the big deliverable was that the brands got these assets to run for paid media. And they saw a 3x reduction in CPM on YouTube utilizing these influencer cut downs versus the kind of glossy ads that they were running previously for pre-roll and mid-roll. And I think the major kind of aha there was that these influencer assets feel much more native to the platform, right? I feel like, consumers get into this mindset where it's like, okay, the moment I can click skip ads, I'm going to click skip ads, right? And they're not even like paying attention. But if they see a video that's like their favorite vlogger talking to them, it feels like a YouTube video that they would have watched anyways. And so I think that phenomenon plays a role somehow.
Yeah, no, it does. I'm a huge proponent across the board. Don't treat paid social like an ad platform. Treat it like a content machine. The better you can get at creating content that looks and feels like your Aunt Sally posted it, the better it's going to do. You need to respond to how the network is. Go look at GQ magazine. Go look at any magazine that's out. What do the advertisements look like? They look like the models that are featured on the front page of GQ because they want to match the look and feel of the magazine. I've never understood why brands don't look at that and go, hey, what do you see a lot on Instagram? You see like Instagram selfies and you see those posts. Okay, we're going to create content that looks similar to that so it feels like we're native to the platform. It's just kind of common sense, but we tend to just think about this thing from such a different angle that we overcomplicate it.
Right. What are some brands that you see out there doing really, really good work? And what are some that are not doing such great work? You don't have to name them necessarily, but like perhaps brands that aren't your clients, like who's doing really great work out there in this space?
Snow Teeth Whitening did such a good job last year. I don't know if you know them. They do these, like they have this device that helps like whiten your teeth. It's them, it's High Smile, it's Smile Pro Worldwide. Those three companies for the teeth whitening space, all three do such a tremendous job. FabFitFun, they're really good utilizing influencers, like branding content to a T. And, when it comes to like Facebook ads, you still have the Pura Vidas who are just constantly executing more creative and trying to get as much life out of it as possible. Again, it's not compelling enough to like, wow, they're going to win awards, but they're getting what they're trying to do, which is acquire sales, right? On the other side, you get so many of these brands like the news industry, newspapers. They're so bad. They're so bad online for conversions. Like being in Los Angeles, I get LA Times ads. I get the exact same ad with the exact same copy every single day, 3 times a day for probably the past year. I have never clicked on it. Nobody's watching it. You're like, you guys can barely afford to keep your journalists and you're wasting money on this stuff. That whole industry just seems so backwards to me. LA Times, you could literally be creating such stellar content as a news organization about getting people to subscribe. I don't know if you remember when Allbirds was doing their stuff. They were great ads, but then eventually they got old, right? It was like, okay, I'm seeing the same thing again. And eventually you get sick of it. Brands that consistently do good are constantly improvising and changing things up every 3 to 6 months and coming up with new ideas and new solutions and not just repeating the same thing over and over again, because eventually everybody's going to get sick of it and move on with their life.
Do you think there is ad fatigue that we're experiencing? I mean, at least on Twitter, I've definitely noticed it. Instagram for sure. I mean, do you think that just from a larger cultural perspective, that ad fatigue is something that the industry may need to grapple with?
Yeah. I mean, we're totally seeing it right now for the holidays. It's so overwhelming to me just how much ads we're seeing on these platforms and the ad load. Like the other day, I clicked on, went on Instagram and it was literally every other post was an ad. And it's just like, okay, like I get it. And eventually you just get sick of it and you log off and go read a book. Facebook and all these companies are grappling with what they should do for ad load. I'm a rarity. I don't have ads on my Twitter. I think I'm in some beta or something where I've never gotten ads on Twitter. I don't know why. I don't really see them there, but yeah, I completely agree. We're kind of in a point where it's a little bit too much. And I've even grappling with it. Like I'm part of the problem. And that's hard because it's like, I would prefer to have less ads and be more competitive because I know what I'm doing versus having what we have now, which is everything's an ad and you're just steering people away. Because then what that means is the good content needs to rise to the top. And that's why it's so important to create that stellar content. And I'll say this, the best ad hacks out there are creating Facebook Lives of product unveils with the brand's owner of the company and getting enough people to watch it and then running that as an ad. Those posts go gangbusters for a lot of industries.
So kind of to wrap up here, I mean, what do you think is next for the future of paid social? I mean, you talked a little bit about brands' reliance on some of these social platforms. Let's say Facebook and Instagram, 100% of their dollars go there. If these platforms go away or they don't have a diversified strategy elsewhere, then they could be in trouble. Who knows what's going to happen with regulatory intervention, with the FTC and breaking up Facebook. I mean, really, it's quite unpredictable, I feel like. And so what do you think is next?
So I would say Facebook's going to continue to improvise. I mean, we have to be prepared for what's going to happen. I'm not necessarily concerned about Facebook breaking up. I just think in order for Facebook to break up, it's going to be years, right? If you study history, the one company you can look at is Standard Oil, right? Who had to break up, John D. Rockefeller, and then he owned, what did he have, like a stake in like Chevron and Shell and Mobil and all it's the free market seems to always win in the long run, for lack of a better word. That's what happens. I'm less concerned about that. What I'm concerned about as a whole is what you said, it is the ad fatigue. And it's no longer a novelty in these platforms. But what that does is it actually excites me because my job as a media buyer historically has been to educate as best as I can best practices and doing things ethical and doing things the right way. And when Facebook as a whole and Instagram and Twitter and all these platforms, when they go down a rabbit hole of you're going on Alibaba, you're buying a product and you're running ads to a drop shipping site, that's not really a brand. That's not really, you're just trying to make money, that hurts the brands and it hurts the people promoting the brands. So the quality will always rise to the top and the good media buyers will always rise to the top and the brands doing and having good product market fit will always rise to the top, no matter what ad platform it is. And that's how you have to look at everything in this game. And as an influencer too, if like an influencer is listening to this, it's like, what am I doing to produce content that my audience likes and I'm not being fake? And if you're producing truth and value and something that a person that 6 months down the line, if they're not leaving, that means that you're producing something good and you have a message that people want to hear. And I think that's really at the end of the day, the core of these platforms is looking at them as channels of communication. They're not businesses that are going to build your business to grow. We're just renting space on them.
Super interesting. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. This has been really, really fascinating. So how can people contact you?
You can find me mainly on Twitter. I'm known as not having a website. There's actually a reason for it. I wasn't taking on projects this year, and I just didn't want a website because I didn't want people to find me. I eventually will get one, but you can find me on Twitter at Herrmann Digital, and my last name is spelled with 2 R's and 2 N's. So you can find me there. In the show notes, I can give you the link to the Facebook group if anyone wants to join. It's basically you have to be spending money on Facebook. That's really the criteria to get in the group.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much again. You've just listened to the Sponsored Post podcast with your host, Justin Moore. You can subscribe to hear more great interviews and episodes via Apple and Google Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information on Trending Family, you can visit trendingfamily.com. See you next time.